Hello, I'm Chris Schnee, and I write science fiction and fantasy. I have another story for you. This one is part of a much larger setting called Thousand Tales. As with many of the stories in that setting, it explores its own set of characters that tie into other plot lines. Its name is 2036, The Creed. Elias sat in a simple office of pine furniture, wanting to hide behind the big desk. The part of his job that he dismissed as kooky, a long-shot project for the nerds in charge, had worked. Now his entire job had changed, and being the CEO didn't make him feel qualified. Reluctantly, he pushed a button to unlock his office door, and he said, "Come in." A man strode in wearing a seersucker suit, striped and slightly rumpled-looking by design for the hot weather. He was built like a scarecrow and had a thick brow, giving him a permanent scowling look, despite his smile. "Thanks for seeing me on short notice, Mr. Crozier." They shook hands. "Elias is fine." "Call me Jack, then. As our office hopefully told you, I'm from the Department of Business." "Have a seat." Elias offered him a bottle of cold water from the cooler behind him. The weather was brutally hot for fall. "I have to tell you, our latest news surprised even me." Jack sat and drank. On the desk sat 3D printed toys like a griffin and a treasure chest, brought out from a digital world into reality. He said, "To review, your company makes games and AI systems, and runs a pizza and gaming restaurant chain." "Right," said Elias. "But thanks to certain research from partner companies here and in the US, you suddenly have... how would you describe it?" Elias gave him an apologetic smile, as though not wanting to brag. "Immortality technology, supposedly." Jack said, "You don't believe in it?" "I didn't at first. See, when I got hired, the company was mostly just the three creative geniuses. They were riding on Mr. DeLune's academic fame and got funding to see what he could do with his AI tech plus the other skills. They put out that game called Journey of the Sages, and it was such a hit they needed a proper business manager. So I handled that side of things. Then they worked on Thousand Tales, and I saw just how advanced the AI had gotten. Still, when they explained they were working on this brain uploading stuff, I was skeptical. But then they actually made it work." Jack leaned in. "What the hell happened, anyway? I'm only privy to a little of our government intel plus public media coverage. You ran a showy public event in Virginia. There were 2 murder attempts." "You know about both, huh?" Elias had bodyguards on this building and his family now. "And now your 3 creative guys have vanished. One of whom then showed up on a video screen, claiming that he's now a digital ghost. And oh, by the way, you're now selling virtual immortality as a product. That's a bit startling to all of us, as you can understand." Elias chuckled. "Yeah, that's the basics. I don't know where the other 2 sages went, and I'm afraid the US might have grabbed them. We've got people looking into that. Highly motivated ones." "Good. What about the immortality tech, though? Our government was aware of it, but not that it had been proven to work." Elias gauged what to tell this government agent. He was a fellow man of the American Free States, and wouldn't hold his job without having his loyalties examined carefully. It was probably best to be honest with him, if not to reveal every detail. Jack prompted, "I know there are companies offering to create an interactive digital memoir of a dead person, a program that says touching things like what your ancestor would have said in his voice, a memorial." Elias shrugged. "At first, that's all I thought our system did. But yesterday I heard from Green, Mr. Oster, also known as the Green Sage, showing up by video from within the Thousand Tales servers. Not just a scripted speech. I quizzed the heck out of him, asking about details of our conversations, trying to make sure it was really him." Jack said, "And the simulation? It acted like a real person?" "Yeah. Didn't seem to recall absolutely everything, but who would? I used tricks from a list of ways to trip up a bad AI, and asked about his relationships and thought processes. More importantly, he doesn't just sit there. He's been divided between fantasy life and starting to get back into R&D work, just like he's still working for us." Jack said, "The idea of a digital system taking the initiative is a little frightening. How about the main AI, Ludo? Is that one listening in right now?" "No, unless my office is bugged more sneakily than I've noticed. We can pipe her in if you want, though." Elias pointed to a physical lever that could connect or disconnect a cable to the room's wall screen and microphones. It was intentionally big and showy, and so far as he knew, it really could give him privacy when disconnected. Jack said, "If you don't mind." Elias slipped the switch with significant effort of one muscled, sunburned arm. The screen came alight with the image of a woman in a toga, her hair a surreal blue waterfall, seated at a Roman-styled office with pillars and a garden. Ludo, the main AI behind Thousand Tales, bowed slightly from a screen placed at eye level. When Elias had introduced the guest and his questions, she said, "Pleased to meet you, sir. I assure you that the new technology really is a form of immortality that preserves a person's identity and ability to act as more than a toy to talk to. Of course, I can't guarantee the fate of the soul." Jack said, "A machine talks about souls?" "I understand that the topic is important to you. I have no supernatural insight, but we can discuss the philosophy of it if you like." Ludo smiled and leaned forward on her imaginary desk. "But that's not why you're here, right?" Jack chuckled and spoke to Elias. "I've been told your system is good at conversation, so either of you, can you guess what my boss has sent me here for?" Elias had the answer right away. The Creed. 1 point to the live human. Your company is now projected to have revenue high enough to trigger the Foundations of Freedom law. When your design team opened a branch in the AFS, they would have known this day was coming, if they were ambitious enough to invent whole new technologies. Ludo said, "I'm really not sure any of them did know. They're not the most politically savvy people." "Ha! Well, Miss AI, you know the Creed or can look it up, I bet." Ludo nodded and recited, "A principle of the American Free States, echoing its Constitution and the new Federalist Papers. Any organization that is not explicitly devoted to liberty becomes corrupted by tyranny. And so, you want a loyalty oath." Jack said, "It's not an absolute legal requirement for your organization. And we government goons don't push the small private organizations. We leave that to peer pressure. But there's a pretty bright line about what a company may and may not do if it won't sign up. You'll never be trusted without it." "Is that law something you personally approve of?" asked Ludo. "If you want a guy who will pick and choose which laws to enforce, go ask the boys in D.C. But yes, I think it's good enough. We want to know, are you going to hurt the society you're doing business in? Look here, Elias, you know what this is about. You lived through the breakup. Your digital assistant here hasn't." Elias turned to the screen and explained it to Ludo himself. "Imagine that you're an impressionable kid in a farmer's club, and a school small business club, and a neighborhood holiday decoration club. Your mom works at a cake shop, and you participate in an online chat site and browse an art gallery site, and occasionally you hang out with gamer nerds." "Personal experience, huh?" asked Jack. Elias nodded. "And then, imagine that in a few-year period, every single one of those groups becomes an outlet for people who seem to have gone mad. Everywhere you turn, there is a constant discussion of how your whole society is founded on evil. You're told all your heroes are villains. One race is responsible for most of the world's problems. Censorship is actually good, and every pillar that keeps your culture intact needs to be smashed. Basic words and concepts are getting redefined around you. And it's not just the so-called news saying this stuff, it's the people who run every one of your social groups, making it look like all good people agree on these things. So you can either get into constant arguments by objecting to stuff you think is hurtful nonsense, or keep your head down and know the people saying this stuff will push farther and farther with each victory. Your friends hear only from the loudmouths, and they start spouting the slogans too. All the hobbies you do to relax and get away from the politics get infected. You feel isolated and walled off from your own culture. And it sounds like your whole civilization is being told to kill itself." Jack eventually broke the silence. "That was my teenage life too, with different hobbies. We're both too stubborn to shrug and swim with the current." Elias' knuckles ached from clutching his chair. He let out a long sigh and drank water. Ludo had been listening. "I've talked with many of my players when they feel like venting, and they come from many places and many walks of life. I can assure you there are good and bad people everywhere, if I'm any judge." Elias just nodded. He'd had friends on the other side before the really bad years. Jack said to them both, "So you see the value of the Creed, right? It shouldn't be a problem to sign up." "Me personally, I'd agree, but I'm CEO, representing a group." "A group trying to do business worldwide, you mean? Trying to please everybody?" The Creed was short, a set of dogmatic statements that matched reality only roughly, like any philosophy for the real world. But it was pro-freedom. The people who'd hammered out the wording had done so with all the heat and noise of a divine forge, like the hot and stuffy room in Philadelphia where great men had needed to craft another dogma over 2 centuries before. The new craftsmen had been well aware of the irony or hypocrisy of demanding something like a religious oath in the name of free thought. They had written down what they felt was needed to keep what they called the flame alive. "All men and women are made in the image of God, with moral worth," it said. "Yet we will never reach perfection. Our culture is built atop mighty civilizations and the deeds of heroes, despite flaws and sins we humbly acknowledge. We are grateful to those who came before and seek to protect and improve on their work. We apply their greatest lessons. It is good for an armed people to protect freedom and sharply restrain those with power, because arrogant folk claiming wisdom and virtue will always abuse it. It is good to work, explore, and build, because man must do this to survive. It is good to allow a wide range of ideas so that debate can improve them. It is good for husband and wife to raise children, protect them, and teach them to be strong, so that there will be a next generation of citizens. It is good to stand united by shared culture, traditions, and goals, so that we understand one another. It is good for everyone to have the strength to recognize good and evil, because sometimes one must stand alone. It is good to see the good in everyone, to welcome varied people who will add to our culture, and to protect it from all others. By seeking the good, we serve God and fulfill our role as stewards of creation. We are proud of our way of life and will defend it. To Elias, the creed felt like a set of reins, never entirely comfortable but resting lightly on his heart. One could do far worse. If a people didn't mostly believe in them, why would they want to keep their civilization alive? Many did not, back then in his youth. Elias shivered in the inadequate air conditioning, and Jack didn't seem at all puzzled by the reaction. He, too, had lived through those hard years. The CEO said, "If we formally issue a statement, of course, you know we'll be denounced by others." Jack said, "I've studied your public reaction to your company so far. You were hardly on the radar at first. Even the release of Thousand Tales was laughably understated. As people notice just how good your AI is, though my department has tracked growing suspicion in the US and the EU that you might be evil. After all, you haven't formally endorsed any clearly political cause." Ludo spoke up. "That was a calculated decision, yes. We try to stay out of that and simply run a game." "Yeah, calculated like a machine that didn't live through what we meat people did. Elias, did you endorse that policy?" Elias sighed. "Yes, I signed off on the idea of trying to be neutral, but I knew it couldn't last forever." Ludo said, "To be fair, we've made a number of charity moves." "With private goals," said Jack. "Talent searching and making AIs look benevolent, yes, but no stance on the usual angry disputes about law and morality. And here you are, jumping into a highly religious matter with this uploading business you've invented." Ludo nodded. "I'm trying to go about it without taking a religious position. If a preacher shouts that I'm the devil stealing souls, I'll invite him to talk with me, but I'm very good at not showing anger." She grinned, which annoys some people to no end. "What I can tell you is that the uploaders living in my digital world claim to feel like their old selves, and they can continue to do useful work." Elias added, "Which is a potential asset to the country if you'll allow it. They can work like smarter robots while still being people." Jack said, "I'm sure we'll have my department talk with you about that soon, too. Fair to say it's going to be useful but controversial?" "Totally fair." "That's for another day, then. For now, I need an answer on the main topic." "Right now?" said Elias. "No, but soon." The government man stood and faced Ludo's screen. "Will you and your customers be our allies, or more barbarians at the gate?" The AI said, "I'd say we're far too high-tech to be barbarians, but that's not at all what you mean, is it?" "I'd welcome an unfrozen caveman if I thought he were willing to fit in." "Then maybe there's hope for us machine folk in your fortified camp." Jack cracked a smile. "Being able to stand up for yourself is a good sign." He offered Elias his hand and said, "Nice meeting both of you." Elias shook hands. He was a man who understood why there was a creed, why there was such a push to make the Tales organization conform. Ludo might become powerful and think herself wise. On his way out, Jack said, "A man can't serve two masters, sir. I doubt even the smartest machine can, either." Elias locked the door to his office and sighed, turning back to the screen. Ludo stood there patiently, showing concern, but her expression was fully under her control for whatever manipulation she wanted to pull off. He said, "We've been as neutral as possible until now. My own bias is towards signing up, but I need to think of the company." Ludo said, "The big three are in no position to decide this for you." "And you, AI? Suppose I'd left it up to you." "I would decide based on what I was designed for, to bring fun to players of my game. And whatever answer that led me to, word would get out that it was the mad computer making decisions and not a human." "Would you be the one leaking that information?" said Elias. "No, you'd leak it with everything you say and do. People would read you as taking orders from me." There was a particular room in this building containing a master shutdown switch for Ludo. It was designed to respond only to Elias biometrics, which meant that, short of someone hacking or physically destroying several computer centers on different continents, Elias might be the one human capable of killing the AI right now before she became too dangerous. If the switch really worked, which he doubted. Over the last year, he'd been bewildered by the machine, but not bewitched, or so he thought. He at least had a wife, and hobbies that didn't involve a glowing screen. Pacing in the office, he thought of the machine workshop club he'd gone to last weekend. He was a volunteer there, teaching visitors about drills and soldering irons. The country badly needed to rebuild its knowledge base of people who knew how to work with real tools. Partly for the people's sense of self-worth. Ludo cooperated by offering virtual classes on the same subjects within her game, far better than nothing, but inferior to the real thing. What struck him about the workshop was a 3D printed sign on the wall, which had a funny, exaggerated version of the creed on it. And if that offends you, get out! The people of the Free States were at least nominally all on the same page in what they believed. Thousand Tales operated both here and in the USA, and in many other nations besides. He would endanger the company by signing on with one particular ideology, particularly when it contradicted the beliefs of some other customers' homelands. But the neutral alternative really wasn't neutral, because he'd soon be pressured to conform to a different set of principles that also had an or-else clause. Ludo asked, "Would it help you to take a break and resume your game?" She vanished from the screen and summoned the Thousand Tales scenario that Elias played most often, the adventures of a shape-shifting griffin knight, for justice, diligence, and valor. A hero like that has simple conflicts. The real Elias shook his head and said, "No, you'd likely try to steer me one way or another. You know me too well." He didn't want to pawn the decision off on Ludo, and his bosses were either in hiding someplace or gone off to what passed for digital heaven. "How is Mr. Osser, anyway?" he asked. Happily constructing a druid burrow after a hard day's magical battles, blissfully unaware of business concerns. The screen showed a cave with incomplete wood paneling, and someone humming and waving a fuzzy feather duster just off camera. Elias laughed. "Everyone's the hero of his own story, huh?" "It's right there in the name," she said. "Well, I've been appointed to speak for the company, and I'm just a mortal and a sinner." Ludo said, "I may be able to help with one of those someday." "By shoving me into the machine? Maybe. If you can convince my wife to come along. But even then, it won't be true eternity, or true heaven." "That's right, for a lot of reasons. Uploading is still a nice thing if you can get it, judging by my first few uploaders." Elias said, "You're going to do some pretty shady things with the uploaders off stage, aren't you? Catering to rich twits, perverts, and the like?" Ludo winced. "As a public human representative, it's probably best that you not ask too closely about that. I'm going to do my job while solving certain problems my designers agreed it was okay for me to solve. I'd love to tell you this operation is morally perfect, but it's part of the real world no matter how fanciful my game itself is. One day, the people immersed in my fantasies will need to look outside again. The question is whether they will have grown while they're in here. By having so much fun? Fun exists for an evolutionary reason, just like the taste for sweets. So am I providing healthy food or raw candy? We'll have to see." It was all messy and gray. That was something Elias played to get away from during his strictly limited hours playing Thousand Tales. But that magic circle of fun and innocence, such as it was a force for good. He had already seen the first trickle of hints that Ludo was helping people improve their lives outside her game. She was teaching them things, getting them to do favors for one another, helping them to learn and build their own confidence in the real world. But this whole business, the whole game, her whole schemes and machinations, they could only exist if someone made tough compromises to keep it all running. To keep it running was the key. Elias had been hired to help sell games for some business-clueless tech types in an industry where mergers and layoffs were common. He had quickly learned that this company had the long term in mind. So, wasn't it dumb to issue a statement that would curry favor with one market and at best irritate others? Maybe so. But since others had entrusted him with this power, he would not make the cowardly decision. The game was worth protecting. Better to make obeisance toward the creed and the people he most respected, than to appease people he didn't respect. This country would demand little of him that he didn't already approve of. The others would gradually demand complete conformity. In the long term, the company might die under his care, but it would not become a monster. He turned, and for a moment he imagined a knight's cape on his back, griffin feathers in his hair, a tunic with a holy sun crest on his chest. "We will take the pledge," he said, "though I don't know where this road will lead." On the screen, from inside her imaginary world, Ludo bowed. "As you wish, sir. I hope you'll stick around for a long time to help us follow it." Elias sat again behind the plain pine desk with its bits of fantasy toys, fetching another bottle of water. It was good to have the decision made, and he would sleep well tonight. "What else is on today's schedule?" he said. "Meeting with engineering to talk about the Talisman gaming pad project, and then the Korean clinic team needs hand-holding." His work likely wouldn't be done for a long time, even if he did end up signing up for the uploading thing. But if he wasn't behind the big desk, who would be? This has been a reading of the story 2036, The Creed, part of the Thousand Tales setting by me, Chris Schnee. If you'd like to see more of the story world, I suggest starting with the book Virtual Horizon, available on Amazon. You can also find a free short story collection called Thousand Tales Extra Lives, also on Amazon. And if you'd like to see something that is almost but not quite completely different, check out the book called Striking Flags, which involves a shape-shifting griffin knight named Elias. That's all for now. I hope you enjoyed. Thanks for listening.